Hello, welcome to Chapter 5, Holes, Biology, Holes, Anatomy, Physiology, Part 1, Chapter 5. Let's start off. Tissues. How do cells form tissues? You probably don't know that answer. That's why you're watching this lecture. I don't know that answer either. So I'm going to Google it. Look how easy this is. Google. How do cells form tissues? And you could probably figure it out. Well, okay, maybe I'll just tell you. How do cells form tissues? Here we have cells connected by different types of junctions, okay? You take two different or similar cell types and you put them together and it has a specific function and we get a tissue. So different types of junctions include adhesion junctions, which in other classes you might have learned as desmosomes. These are the hairy purple types that you see here. It looks kind of like a cartoon character if you ask me. Here's his mouth, here's his hair and his beard, and he looks like he's going to go eat you or something. Here we see a adhesion junction or desmosome. They just generically hold cells together to form tissues, found all over the place, including in epithelial tissues, which will be the focus of today. Tight junctions, also found commonly in epithelial tissues. Tight junctions hold cells very closely together, most importantly so that nothing can get in between these cells. We don't want anything passing through. In order to get into this body, you got to go through this membrane, and thus it provides a bodyguard or a point of regulation. Nothing can get in unless I say so. And then lastly, we have gap junctions. These are holes or pores between the cells directly through the membrane so that instead of having to deal with the bodyguard who's just a prick and won't let you in, you can just pass directly through these little holes from one cell to the other nice and easily, and there's no issues. That's called a gap junction. So 4 different tissue types. The first one we'll talk about today, epithelial tissues. The other 3 you'll watch at another time in Part 2. Those are connective tissue, muscle, and nervous tissue. So epithelial tissue are closely packed cells in continuous sheets, so they're largely flattened, essentially. And they're held together by desmosomes and tight junctions, as I mentioned. They have an apical and a basal surface, which I'll talk about in a second. And that basal surface rests on a basement membrane. That membrane is just an attachment point for these cells, so they don't randomly float or travel all over the place. And then epithelial tissues, one interesting thing is they don't have any blood supply. Weird, I know. In order to get oxygen and nutrients, it has to diffuse from the blood vessels, which are a distance away or a number of cells away, from cell to cell to cell through these gap junctions, among other things, in order to get their nutrients and oxygen and get rid of CO2. So what is this apical and basal surface? The apical surface is the part that's exposed to the exterior of the body or to an opening or a lumen of an organ. So in the digestive tract, the cells that line the small intestine, the part that sticks out into the lumen of the small intestine, which is where all the poop is being created, the food is being digested, that section or that surface is called the apical surface, or the top if you like. The basal surface is the bottom side. It's not exposed in any way to the exterior surface, and it's attached to the basement membrane. It's mainly structural or attachment component. 8 types of epithelial tissue. That's kind of a lie because we'll talk about 9. The last one being glandular tissue at the end. And they fit into 2 categories, simple or stratified. So simple epithelia are one layer of cells, as you can see here, and their main functions are for absorption, secretion, and filtration. So things are going in and out of these cells for your benefit, sometimes your harm, but usually your benefit. Stratified epithelia are multiple layers of cells, excuse me, and these multiple layers of cells serve for protection. So things are not necessarily going in and out of these cells. It's here for protection so that nothing can get through, provides strength, support. It's very durable. Let's start with the first type, simple squamous epithelium. They're thin layers which assist in rapid diffusion or filtration. Examples are the walls of the capillaries where nutrients are going in and out of the capillaries, into the blood and out of the blood. Also in the air sacs of the lungs, which are called alveoli, where you take in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide from your body. Simple squamous epithelium line those grape-like looking structures called alveoli and help with the diffusion and movement of things in and out. Simple cuboidal, they get their name because they look like cubes or squares. They also rest on a basement membrane, as do all epithelial tissues. They're common in glands and ducts, ducts being the tubing that carries stuff out. This includes salivary glands and also the surface of the ovaries to help the egg, as it's ovulated, make its way out and into the fallopian tube. Simple columnar epithelium, called that because they look like a column They're pretty characteristic with the nucleus found towards the basement or basal surface and the lots of space at the top. You'll also see mixed in here these purplish, I guess it's all purple, but these cells here that you can see there, these are goblet cells that secrete mucus. So simple columnar epithelial cells are typical of mucosal secretion areas, such as in this image of the GI tract. And what you'll also notice is they make up the sides here of a villus. A villus or microvillus is the small undulations found, for example, in the small intestine that help to increase surface area and thus to aid or provide more areas where things can be absorbed. And this is just all the text of the things that I just said, I suppose. Other places where you find simple columnar epithelium, the uterus, where the baby is held, the stomach, intestines we mentioned, and so on. And we also mentioned goblet cells there for you. Pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Everybody hates pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, not just because the name is way too long, but because they look like stratified epithelium, hence the pseudostratified name, and thus they're very difficult to identify. I won't be tricky, I'll be very straightforward when we're asking you to identify some of these, but it can be problematic because of the columnar shape. If the nuclei vary based on their location, it can look stratified. One characteristic, easy way to identify pseudostratified epithelial cells is because they often have cilia on top, and these cilia aid in movement of things, whether it be dirt particles in your bronchi, left and right, your airways, to carry dirt back up out of your mouth to help you create boogers and spit and things like that, or found along the lining of the oviducts, another name for the fallopian tubes, where after the egg is ovulated, it carries the egg down the fallopian tube and over to the uterus to help make a baby. I assume if you're trying to make a baby, don't make a baby. Stratified squamous epithelium. These are layers of squamous epithelial cells. Again, now we're in our stratified. This is for protection. This makes up the outer layer of your skin. So I can do this, and it doesn't hurt. Well, that kind of hurt. It lines also the mouth and the throat, also the vagina and the anal canal. I know, awkward. But the outer layers of the skin, part of the reason that this doesn't hurt is these cells on the outside here are dead. And if I do this, I lose a lot of cells. Did you see them fall? I didn't really see them either. These cells have been keratinized, where the inside components of the cells have been altered and filled with keratin for structural support. All right. Stratified squamous, here you see on top. I'm pointing with my finger like you can see that. Here, let me use the mouse. Here you can see on top, these have been keratinized. You see nothing internally, no nucleus, no nothing. They're filled with keratin, and that's just for protection. Here's the epidermis, and here's the dermis. We'll talk about that in Chapter 6 when you have to actually know that. Stratified cuboidal, same thing, but they're cubic cells found in the lumen of the mammary glands, also sweat glands and salivary glands, and the pancreas. And these several layers provide, what do you know, protection. Here you see stratified cuboidal, 2 layers of cuboidal cells. Fantastic. These giant blobs here, these are adipose tissue, which happens to be fat. Tasty. Stratified columnar, they are columnar elongated cells. They're stratified, so multiple layers. These are less common, found in places like the vas deferens, which is the tubing that's part of the male reproductive tract, and also the male urethra and parts of the pharynx. Pharynx is found in the throat. Here you see stratified columnar. I know it totally looks like pseudostratified columnar epithelium, but you'll notice there are no cilia on top, so that's easy to identify. And you do notice the nuclei are all over the place because it's stratified. Transitional epithelium, this is the last one of the stratified category. Transitional epithelium is only found in the urinary bladder. Where is it found? I can't hear you. Yeah, in the urinary bladder, because it stretches as you fill it with pee. It can stretch bigger, and when it stretches, it sends a signal to your brain and says, I got to go, and hopefully you hold it until you get to the bathroom. But the cells themselves can stretch. They're distensible and keep urine from traveling backwards, essentially. It can expand. The last one, number 9, is considered epithelium, but it kind of fits its own category. It's not stratified, and it's not simple. They make up endocrine and exocrine glands. Okay, endocrine glands are not connected to the outside surface. They secrete chemicals, typically hormones, into the body, so into the bloodstream, and then they travel around through the bloodstream to your other cells. Examples include pituitary gland, adrenal glands, pineal gland, and so on. Endo means inside, if you didn't pick that up. Exocrine glands, here we see exo means outside. These glands are connected by ducts or tubing pathways to the outside of the body. Now here's a weird thing. This includes sweat and oil glands and the liver and the pancreas. Wait a second. The liver makes something that goes outside of my body? Yes, the liver makes bile and it secretes that bile into my small intestine. Yes, the small intestine is outside the body. That tube that connects your mouth to this region, I won't show you, that would be awkward, is outside the body. And until that food and the nutrients make their way across a membrane through those epithelial cells into my bloodstream or into my cells, will they be inside the body. So exocrine glands secrete things outside the body. Glands in general, just to make sure you understand, they secrete a particular product. There are one or more cells that make them up, and secrete means to take that molecule and to put it into a water-based environment, an aqueous solution. And on that note, we're going to stop here for part 1.